Our theme is pretty simple: for all, forever. We're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to talk about the gospel. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not a know-it-all. I am, but I don't want to be. And so tonight, what I'm about to say may sound offensive if it's the first thing out of my face, but I want you to reason with me tonight. If I ask what is the gospel in a room of this many people, we would get 70 or 80 variations. And they would all contain a seed of the gospel, but not the whole tree, not all the fruit. We live in a country where the truth is, we believe the gospel is, I'm no longer going to hell. And I want to break the gospel wide open. And the only way you break the gospel wide open and taste every flavor, the sweet and the salty, the spicy and the mellow, the only way you ever do that is if you enter into the gospel by one man. Not by a church, not by a series of doctrines, but by a person. So this summer when you couldn't do anything, or last summer when you couldn't do anything, I was talking to my 27-year-old son, and he asked me if I'd seen a movie. And I said, no, I haven't seen that. And he said, did you see this one? And I said, no. He goes, have you seen any of them? And I was like, nah, I guess we're not a movie-watching family. Well, he married into a movie-watching family. And he was so disappointed. I hadn't seen that look in his eyes since he was a 16-year-old. He looked at me like, and you're my dad? My wife and I had never seen any of the Marvel films. I know. Hey, judge not, lest ye be judged. We hadn't seen any of them. So my son Alex looked at Heather, my wife, and I, and he said, all right, we're going to watch them this summer. We had nothing else to do. I'm like, cool. 23 films. Over 8 Friday nights. 50 hours of story, action, drama, and listen to this word, and resolution. Every story fascinates me. I ruin films for my family because I'm always dissecting them for sermons. And what I realized in those 50 hours of some pretty amazing films, some pretty amazing storylines, what captured me wasn't the buildings blowing up and all of the cool acrobatics. What really got me was I learned something, whether it's DC or Marvel. Have you noticed that every storyline is about the resolution to the origin story of the person? I want you to think about this with me, because it's going to make sense all week every time I talk. You're going to see what we see. If you want to understand the gospel, you focus on Jesus. And if you want to understand a great story, if you want to go into the Marvel universe or the DC universe, you're going to notice there's a similar theme. Origin stories define the arc of our story. It's where you started from. You might be able to guess, tell me whose story I'm starting out with. A brilliant but selfish billionaire given a new opportunity to change his life. Oh, come on, Tony Stark. We know who he is. And we can't watch that movie anymore because my wife crushes on him, so that was one time and done. Who's this? The last son of a dying alien world rocketed to Earth. Superman. A lonely average high schooler bitten by a spider. A child seeing his parents murdered in an alley. A scientist, a pilot, and 2 friends design a rocket to experiment in space, and they're hit by a cosmic storm. Fantastic Four. You know stories. Do you know that every story that you know so well is about the origin story of how their lives were altered and how they overcame it? Do you know what the gospel's about? Well, I set you up. I'm not going to tell you a superhero story this week. I want you to understand that this story differs from all of those epic story arcs that we love to live in, the tension and the drama and the suspense. But let me tell you the difference. Within our story, we don't resolve our origin. Somebody has to resolve it for us. Somebody has to fix it for us. Our lives are simple. You and I don't define, we don't resolve our origin story. Jesus does. And I want you to reason with me when we think about this. In John chapter 20, verse 31, John will end. We're going to look at John's depiction of his friend Jesus. And he tells us at the end why he writes everything he writes in the book. He tells us that you would believe in Jesus and have life in his name. The gospel is not just you get saved. The gospel is you get Jesus. All week long. You get an opportunity to have your storyline changed. Your origin story that you can't fix. Divorced parents, abusive situation, abandonment. Maybe your family's picture perfect and you're watching me tonight and you're going, yeah, man, I got nothing to complain about. By the end of the week, God is going to reveal to you that your origin story, as cute and tidy as it may seem, won't get you where you need to go. Someone's got to resolve it. So don't be surprised this week if Jesus' story gets inside yours. In fact, please invite it. Let the gospel work in you. Not just so that you don't go to hell, but that you experience heaven with God today. See, the gospel is an origin story that defines us, and it breaks open our story. What I want to simply do in just the next few moments is I want to walk you through the text and begin to introduce what John wants you and I to see. For many of us, Jesus is a kind of a superhero, isn't he? It's a little bit of mythology. He's this untouchable creature. You know, he probably never laughed at inappropriate things. He probably never joked around. He probably never went to Taco Bell and just had fun, right? We have this stiff, old-fashioned, archaic Jesus. And John shows us his compassion, his humor, his concern. He's for all. And he will be for all forever. And he wants to change your story of origin. He wants to change the arc of your story to a place that you and I could never reach on our own. I want to tell you what John reveals to us in the first 18 verses. And we'll do this quickly. And I want you to listen to the words that I'm going to use and just walk through them with me. Jesus is God before us. His origin story alters ours. We will never alter his. John says in verses 1 through 3, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now that may seem so complicated, but here's what John's trying to reveal to us. When he calls him the Word, he uses the word logos, and what that means is truth. It's knowledge. If you want to know who God is, it says that we can't even understand the thoughts of God. If you and I want to understand the gospel, we focus on Jesus because Jesus reveals God to us. He's not a mini God on internship. He's full God. And John begins by telling the audience some 30 years after Jesus had been through here, John begins to tell these stories. And John wants you and I to know that before you and I ever existed, the story of Jesus saving us began. He was before us. And the fact that he's creator God, it says in verse 3 that all things came into being by him. But it's interesting. Genesis 1 tells me that God created the heavens and the earth. John 1 tells me Jesus created the heavens and the earth. Because there's no difference between the two. They are one, completely one, fully one. So here's all I want you to take out of this big theological point on a night that you're exhausted. Ready? To receive the gospel, to let it change your story, you have to admit he's Lord. He's creator. He's over you. He's more powerful. He's more intelligent. He's more everything than you ever thought you might be. Jesus is enough. If you're going to accept the gospel, it must begin, John says, with the fact that he is Lord. He was before us and he will be after us. He is for all. What's the last word? Forever. All right, let's jump quick. Jesus is God for us. Here's good news. He's not just God. He's a God who's engaged with us. He's in pursuit of us. Verses 4 and 5. In him life was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. He could not fix us if he did not care about us. So he brought light. Just like the creation in Genesis, he said, let there be light, and there was. He brings light into our lives. Without him, we can't find the truth. Without him, we can't find our escape. Without him, we can't find anything. And not only is he there for us, but he does it because he cares for us. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he sent his son to die, that those who believe in him might have what? For all, church, forever. You see, he's not only there, he's there for us. Now, the world doesn't revolve around us, it revolves around him. And the one who gets all the glory and all the honor and all the power actually says he pleads the case for us. He brings us what we need. That light shines in the darkness. So if you're going to open yourself to the storyline that changes yours in the gospel, not only do you have to call him Lord, you get to call him friend. In fact, those are Jesus' words. He said to his disciples, I no longer call you my servants. I no longer call you my employees. I no longer call you people who owe me something. I call you my friends. And Jesus is God with us. He was God before we ever entered the story. He's a God who's for us. He's a God who's with us, verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. Time doesn't allow me to do this, but I hope we can venture into it over the next few mornings. It says here that in Philippians chapter 2, he emptied himself. He gave away all of his power, all of his authority, all of his comfort. He gave away all the things that come to the privilege of being God. He did all of that for you, and he did it so he could be with you. To be with you here. He's not observing on a gold throne in heaven watching us. He is in the midst here. Where the Holy Spirit is, Jesus Christ is. And so in these moments when we sing, in these moments when we laugh, in these moments when we think, we're actually receiving one of the greatest gifts of the gospel. It's not just salvation, it's presence. So I want you to think about me. If you're going to, or think with me rather, if you're going to open yourself to the gospel, you're going to have to say he's Lord. You're going to have to say he's for me. You're going to have to believe that in your identity. You're going to have to say he's available. And if he's available, only a fool doesn't take advantage of that. Only a fool rejects that. A wise person sees the availability of the King of Kings and turns everything of little value away. To say no to things of lesser value so you can say yes to greater value. And it says in verse 10, and he was in our world. He was available. God could have sent a list of rules. God could have set principles. He could have given us all of our desires, but instead, what did he do? He gave away and postponed all the things of value to come down to understand what it was like to be tempted. Now, God could understand that. God didn't need to be flirted with to understand what that felt like. I mean, God didn't come down so we could teach him something. He came down so he could teach us. And he's available to you. He does understand. Your parents divorced, he understands a broken home. Things have happened to you that are horrible and you've been mistreated, he understands. He demonstrated what it was to remain faithful to God when you have all the reasons in the world to take a shortcut. So if you're going to call out the gospel and you're going to let it change your story of origin, he's Lord. He's for you. He's available. And lastly, he's the God who's in and through us. This is where the gospel changes from I'm saved to I have value. I'm not important. I'm useful. Most of us, if we're deep down inside, when the church doesn't make sense to us and we're not committed to it, is because we don't understand how either to access what's available or we're disinterested in the product. And I want you to know that if you pay attention to the gospel this week, you're going to see that the first step of your origin story is not performed by you. It's performed by him. Everything he provides alone. He offers it to every one of us by grace. Verses 10 through 14 is pretty simple. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came into his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, listen carefully, to many of them that opened themselves up to the fullness of the gospel, To them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. Not born of blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of a man, but born of God. The gospel will open up in your life when you let Jesus bring it to you, when you receive it. Because you're going to have to know this week. He is Lord. He's not your buddy, but he's for you. He's powerful, and he's majestic, and he's immense, and there's nothing he can't face, and he's available to you. He's not available so that you just please him. He's available so he can engage you. So when you're lonely and hurting and wondering who you are, the God of the universe will give you all the attention you need to know who you are. And then we open ourselves up to the last thing. He will bring you grace and truth. And those sound so beautiful and sound so poetic, but let me tell you this. The grace of God will let you handle the truth of God. One will change you, and one will make you want to be changed. The gospel is not about one day I get to go to heaven. The gospel is today I get to be with Jesus. Today he's my Lord. Today he tells me who I am. Today he's available to me in this moment, at this time, to lead me by his grace into his truth. Because the world is not looking for a God who leads them. They're looking for a God they lead. The gospel will open up to all of us. Because there was a mystery being talked about. How would God save the world? And Paul tells us the mystery has been solved through Jesus. The kingdom of heaven is open to all of us who will believe that we might be born again. Where are you tonight? Is the gospel the passion? Is the gospel your heartbeat? Ask yourself this question tonight when you meet with your group. What is the gospel? What am I missing?